The wedding hall glittered with golden lights, crystal chandeliers casting a soft glow on the carefully decorated stage. Guests whispered in excitement, the orchestra played softly, and the bride's family waited for the moment the groom would appear. Everything seemed perfect, until the grand doors at the back of the hall creaked open. A hush fell over the crowd. Everyone turned their heads. Standing there, dressed in a modest but elegant dress, was the CEO's ex-wife. People exchanged quick glances, some in surprise, some in curiosity. She had not been seen at any public gathering since the divorce, and yet here she was, walking into his wedding as if she had every right to be there. But it wasn't just her presence that caught everyone's attention. Beside her stood a girl, no older than 14. She was tall for her age, with dark, serious eyes and features so strikingly familiar that the groom felt his breath catch in his throat. His heart gave a painful thump. He stared, unable to look away, as if his world had suddenly been knocked off balance. The bride, standing at the front with her bouquet, shifted uncomfortably. Her eyes flicked from the groom's pale face to the mysterious girl entering with the ex-wife. Murmurs rose among the guests, whispers of speculation darting from table to table. The ex-wife walked forward with measured grace, her hand gently resting on the girl's shoulder. She didn't smile. Her expression was calm, but her eyes carried the weight of secrets that had been hidden too long. The girl's gaze, however, met the groom's directly, steady, almost defiant, as though she knew exactly why she was here and what her presence meant. The CEO's chest tightened. Something deep inside him told him the truth before a single word was spoken. That girl, she looked like him. The music faltered as the ex-wife reached the front rows, the girl still by her side. The groom's hands clenched at his sides, his pulse racing as every eye in the room bore down on him. For a moment, he tried to mask the storm inside with the calm expression of a CEO who had faced boardrooms full of critics. But this wasn't business, this was personal, and the truth was burning its way out. Why is she here? The bride whispered, her voice trembling as she leaned slightly toward him. And who is that girl? He couldn't answer. His throat was dry. His eyes stayed locked on the child who was looking back at him with those dark, unmistakably familiar eyes. The ex-wife stopped just a few steps away, her gaze meeting his. For years, they had avoided one another, letting the silence between them do the work of closure. But tonight, in front of hundreds of people, silence was no longer possible. "I didn't come to ruin your happiness," she said softly, though her words carried clearly through the stunned hall. "I came because there is something you deserve to know." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The bride stiffened, her bouquet trembling in her grip. The girl stepped slightly forward now, her fingers tightening around the folded piece of paper she held. She didn't look at the bride, or the guests, only at him. "Dad," she said quietly, her voice fragile yet certain. The single word shattered the air like glass breaking. Guests clutched their mouths in shock, the bride staggered back a step, and the CEO's chest constricted as though the floor had disappeared beneath him. His ex-wife gently placed a hand on the girl's shoulder. "This is your daughter," she whispered, her eyes filling with unshed tears. "The truth I never had the courage to tell you, until today." The bride turned toward him in disbelief. You have a daughter." Her voice cracked. "And you never told me." The room erupted in whispers, the wedding that had begun as a fairy tale now teetering on the edge of scandal. The CEO, breathless and shaken, took a single step toward the girl, staring at her as if trying to make sense of the years he had lost. The murmurs in the hall grew louder, each whisper like a dagger in the groom's chest. His bride stood frozen, her face pale, her fingers crushing the bouquet as though it were the only thing holding her together. The CEO's eyes shifted between the girl, his ex-wife, and the woman he was about to marry. His life, so carefully controlled, was slipping out of his hands. He turned sharply toward his ex-wife, his voice low but edged with fury. "Why now? Why here? You kept this from me for years, and you choose my wedding to tell me." Her jaw tightened, but her eyes softened with guilt. "Because you would never have listened any other way. You were too busy building your empire, too busy leaving everything behind, including me." "Including her." She brushed her hand gently across the girl's hair. The bride's voice cracked as she spoke. "You lied to me," she whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. "You told me everything about your past. Every failure, every heartbreak, and yet this. She motioned toward the girl, her chest heaving. How could you not know? The CEO's voice faltered. I didn't know, he admitted, almost to himself. His eyes returned to the girl, who stood trembling but unyielding, holding that folded letter like a shield. But looking at her now, God, I can't deny it. The girl finally stepped forward, her voice breaking as she spoke. I don't want to ruin your wedding. I just wanted you to know, I exist. Her small hands shook as she extended the letter toward him. Mom said you deserved this one day. I begged her to let me come. The crowd quieted, waiting. Even the bride's tears stilled as she looked at the child who had just cracked open the groom's soul. He reached out with an unsteady hand, taking the paper as though it weighed more than the world itself. Why did you hide her from me? He asked his ex-wife, his voice filled with pain. Because I was scared, she confessed, her lips trembling. Scared you'd reject her. Scared you'd reject me all over again. I thought I was protecting her, but maybe I was wrong. The bride backed away, her eyes wide, her heart torn between love and betrayal. The hall was silent again, the weight of choice pressing down on everyone. The hall had gone still, the kind of silence so heavy it pressed against the skin. The groom stood at the center of it all, holding the unopened letter in his trembling hand. His bride's eyes were filled with tears, pleading for an answer, while his ex-wife's gaze was lowered, her face shadowed with regret. And then there was the girl, his daughter, looking up at him with a fragile mixture of hope and fear. He opened the letter slowly. The paper was creased, worn from being held too many times. As he read, his breath grew uneven. It was a confession written years ago, words from his ex-wife explaining how she had found out she was pregnant after their divorce, how she had wanted to tell him but convinced herself he had moved on, how she had promised herself that one day, the truth would come to light. The words blurred in his vision as tears welled up. He folded the letter carefully and looked at the girl. His voice broke. All these years, I should have been there. For your first steps, for your birthdays, for everything. And I wasn't. I didn't even know your name. Emily, she whispered, her voice cracking. My name is Emily. The single word tore at him, and before he could stop himself, he pulled her into his arms. She stiffened for a heartbeat, then melted into the embrace, clinging to him as though she had waited her entire life for that moment. The bride gasped, covering her mouth. The guests shifted uncomfortably, some moved, some scandalized. He turned then, still holding Emily, and faced the woman waiting at the altar. His fiancée's eyes glistened with anguish. She shook her head slightly, her voice trembling. If you choose her, everything changes. Our life, our future. His chest rose and fell heavily. He looked between them, the bride he had promised a new beginning with, and the daughter who had just shattered and reshaped his world in a single night. Finally, he spoke, his tone steady, resolute. I can't pretend she doesn't exist. She's my blood, my daughter. I won't abandon her, not again. A sharp breath escaped the bride, tears spilling down her cheeks. She turned away, her bouquet falling from her hands, scattering petals across the marble floor. The guests whispered again, but this time, many nodded in quiet approval. The CEO held Emily tighter, his heart raw but finally truthful. He looked down at her, his voice gentle. From today forward, you'll never have to wonder if you have a father. You'll never face this world alone. And though the wedding had fallen apart, something far more powerful had begun. A bond that had waited years to be claimed, and a man finally choosing truth over appearances, family over pride.